Okay, geometry students, we are going to be starting a study today of Chapter 3, and Chapter 3 is all about parallel and perpendicular lines. Now, I know this sounds easy, but you will learn a lot of new things in this chapter, okay? In this video today, we are going to be looking at some definitions about certain types of lines. We will also then attempt to recognize these lines that are drawn in some given diagrams, okay? So that's our goal for today in the video. Let's go ahead and get started. Please copy this heading in your notes today. Your heading for today is called Relationships Between Lines. Relationships Between Lines, the lesson number is lesson 3.1. And be sure and include today's date, students, if you would, okay? Today's date. So again, your heading is Relationships Between Lines. The lesson number is lesson 3.1, and be sure and include today's date. All right, let's continue on. Now, let's start off by looking at three definitions, okay? Three definitions. Here's the first one, parallel lines. Now, this is an old definition you've had for years, probably in middle school and elementary school. It's pretty simple, and here it is. Parallel lines are two lines that do not intersect, but they do lie in the same plane. Now, students, I want to show you what that means, okay? It's very important in geometry you understand that parallel lines have to lie in the same plane. Later on, I'm going to give you an example of two lines that do not intersect, but they also don't lie in the same plane. Thus, they're not parallel lines. Now, that might not have made a lot of sense, but I will come back to that later, okay? Right now, just listen to my example, okay? And sorry, students, my voice is really rough today, but pretend you have a sheet of paper, okay? And on that sheet of paper, you drew a line. And then on that same sheet of paper, you drew another line parallel to that line. That would be an example of two lines that are parallel. They're both lying in the same plane because they're both drawn on the sheet of paper. And that sheet of paper is like representing a plane. So the sheet of paper is your plane, and the two lines that are drawn on the sheet of paper are your lines. So that would be an example of parallel lines. Two lines that lie in the same plane that do not intersect, okay? Now please copy this in your notes. You're responsible for that on tests and quizzes coming up, okay? All right, perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are two forms that intersect to form a right angle, or in other words, a 90-degree angle, okay? So here's a line going this way, and here's a line going this way. Do you see how they form a perfect, it's like a perfect L or a perfect T, okay? And when that happens, we call those lines perpendicular lines because they form a right angle. Now, Mr. Earhart, do perpendicular lines have to lie in the same plane? No, they do not. You could actually have a situation, pretend you have a sheet of paper right here, okay? And a line drawn on the sheet of paper. And then you take a pencil and you poke the pencil through the paper like that, okay? Well, if this pencil is going perfectly straight up and down and your sheet of paper is perfectly horizontal, then these two lines are going to form a right angle. They're not in the same plane, but they're still perpendicular. So perpendicular lines are two lines that intersect to form a right angle, okay? All right, let's continue on. Obviously, you should copy this in your notes. I shouldn't have to tell you that. You know that. And you're responsible for that term on tests and quizzes. All right, let's continue on. Skew lines. Skew lines are two lines that do not intersect, but they don't lie in the same plane. Copy that down, please. Skew lines are two lines that do not intersect, and they also don't lie in the same plane. So please listen to me carefully, students, okay? Here we go. Now, let's say that you have a sheet of paper again, okay? Now, all these drawings I'm doing, I know they're not the best, but you don't have to copy these down, but if they help you, then please copy them down, okay? Pretend you have a sheet of paper and you have a line like this drawn on the sheet of paper. And then back to my example where you take a pencil and you poke it through the paper. In the last example I gave, you poked the pencil through the paper right on that line. But let's say this time you poke the pencil through the paper right here. So your pencil comes down, hits right here, and then comes out down here below the paper. Well, listen, students, I mean, it's common sense. These two lines will never intersect, okay? I mean, one line is here on the paper, so that line is in one plane, and then this line here is passing through the plane, but this line here that's going up and down, we don't say that it lies in the plane. It's definitely not lying in the plane. It's intersecting the plane. It's passing through it, but it doesn't lie in the plane. So we're going to call this line A and line B. Lines A and B are not parallel, even though they'll never intersect, and they won't intersect, but they're not parallel. They're skew. They're two lines that do not intersect, and they also do not lie in the same plane, okay? I hope you see that. We call that skew lines, okay? Now let's quickly look at two examples that will help reinforce these definitions, okay? So please copy these in your notes. Now, instead of drawing the pictures down, just put in your notes page 108, example number 2, and then answer these two questions. Now, if you want to take time and draw this picture here in your notes, feel free to. But to save time, I will just write in your notes page 108, example number 2, so that you know where the problem came from. And then let's answer these two questions. So first of all, are F and H skew? Well, students, for F and H to be skewed, two things have to be true. They cannot intersect, and they cannot lie in the same plane. So let's see, let's get my colored pen out here. Here's F, and here's H. Well, number one fails. If F and H are skew lines, they can't intersect. And look, they're intersecting right here, okay? So no, they are not skew. They intersect. Skew lines cannot intersect. Now let's take a look at the other two lines, F and G. Well, here's F, and here's G. They are not intersect. I know it looks like F is intersecting G, but it's not. G is like the line that's drawn on a sheet of paper. F is like the pencil that's getting poked through the paper right here. So those two lines are not intersecting, and they also don't lie in the same plane. They're in two different planes. Now F is passing through plane B, but it's not lying in plane B. So yes, these two lines are skew. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Let's continue on. Now again, students, to save yourself time and not draw this diagram, if I were you, I would write down page 109, numbers 1 through 3 at the top. Just copy this in your notes, students. Okay, I would not copy this picture. Just write down your notes, page 109, numbers 1 through 3 at the top. Okay, students, here we go. So let's take a look at this here. Number 1 says, name a pair of parallel lines. Now remember, to have parallel lines, now listen, students, they cannot intersect, but they must lie in the same plane. Well, students, here it is. Look, X and Y are like two lines that are drawn on a sheet of paper. And here's your sheet of paper right here. So those two lines lie in the same plane. They're also not intersecting. How do I know that? Because look at this arrow right here on the line. This arrow here and this arrow here drawn on the lines means they're parallel. They don't intersect. So the two lines that lie in the same plane and do not intersect are lines X and Y. Okay, now let's name a pair of perpendicular lines. Well, remember, perpendicular lines are two lines that form a right angle. So look, here's line X and here's line Z. And look, students, how they form a right angle. So lines Z and X are perpendicular, okay? And then lastly, name a pair of skew lines. Now remember, skew lines cannot intersect. And they cannot lie in the same plane. Well, here it is. Look, students. Here's line Y. It's like a line drawn on the sheet of paper. And here's Z. It's like a pencil being poked through the paper at this point right here. So Z and Y will never intersect, and they both don't definitely lie in the same plane. So they're skew lines. They do not intersect, and they do not lie in the same plane. Okay? So Z and Y are skew lines. Okay? All right, let's continue on. Now, students, let's look at one more definition. The other three definitions we have already looked at were about lines, right? Skew lines, parallel lines, perpendicular lines. This upcoming definition is about planes, okay? So please copy this in your notes. Parallel planes. Parallel planes are planes that do not intersect, okay? Planes that do not intersect. Now, instead of trying, I will try to draw this, but I don't have a lot of artistic skills. But the best thing for me to say to you is, let's see, let's pretend that there's a little gap right here. There's a gap right here. The best way to describe parallel planes would be like a bookshelf, students, like a bookshelf. And you know how you have a bookshelf here that sticks out of a bookshelf that books are on, and then right below it is another bookshelf. Well, those two bookshelves that are above and below each other are parallel planes. Also, another example would be like a sheet of paper that you're holding up in the air, then another sheet of paper below it that you're holding up in the air. Two sheets of paper, they're both, if you're holding up both sheets of paper so that they're horizontal to the ground, then both of those planes will be parallel, okay? And so parallel planes are planes that do not intersect. Now, here's an example of planes that are parallel and also intersect. Okay, like look at this plane here. See this plane right here? And this is a perfect example here, students, of like the bookshelf example that I was giving you. Here's like a bookshelf sticking out and another bookshelf sticking out here. Those two planes are parallel. So plane B and plane C are parallel. However, plane B and plane D are intersecting. And notice when two planes intersect, they intersect at a line right here. Okay. Also, you could say that plane C and plane D intersect right here also. Okay. So that's it for the video today, guys. I hope this has made sense. It's pretty simple. It's not difficult. It's a pretty short video. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call or email, and please continue to work hard in class.